There's a reporter for The Atlantic who blocked me recently because I quote tweeted him in a critical of the media in general. But we're seeing something quite a bit where they're saying there's this meme going around where the journalists say if the past 4 years of Trump was like drowning in a vat of Tabasco sauce, then the next 4 years of Biden will be like sipping unflavored almond milk. And everyone laughs like, haha, Joe Biden's going to be so boring, right? So Joe Biden hurts his ankle, okay? And this reporter for The Atlantic posts an image saying Joe Biden playing with dog hurts ankle. And he says, you know, an image of how boring the next several years are going to be. And then he does this joke where it's like 2019, Donald Trump extra legally calls for an investigation of Saturday Night Live because they made a critical, you know, sketch about him. 2021, you know, Joe Biden plays with a dog, something like that. So my response was 2011, Barack Obama orders drone strike on civilian cafe in country we're not at war with, killing a 16-year-old American citizen. And his response to the public is, oopsie. 2020. Joe Biden's transition team is looking a lot like Barack Obama's team, so we're going to get Obama 2.0. Point being, journalists are basically telling us they're not going to do their jobs.
Totally.
They're already saying, it's so funny playing with a dog. Meanwhile, it's like, okay, should we count down the days until he blows up some kids?
I mean,
I'll take bets.
It's definitely a situation where you're going to have them using, oh, there's a rescue pet. You know, oh, look at the funny socks. Oh, you know, Tony Blinken, he plays the guitar. That's the thing that we're going to talk about the next Secretary of State. And it's like, aren't there more important things that are going to need to be addressed here? I mean, the most significant, obviously, being, I still have no idea what Joe Biden's secret plan to end the coronavirus looks like.
He doesn't have one.
I mean,
of course he doesn't.
It just seems to be yell on the phone via, you know, at governors to have more mask mandates.
Now, we can play the partisan game, and I can say, I just read a story that Joe Biden hurt his ankle playing with a dog. What is this man doing playing with a dog during one of the worst pandemics we've ever experienced? Shouldn't he be working on something instead of playing around? You can play silly games, criticize him for whatever you can, but that's like the partisan that's the partisan media run.
Barack Obama admits that he was smoking throughout his entire tenure at the White House.
Smoking pot?
No,
I wish.
Cigarettes.
But
maybe he wouldn't have killed so many kids.
Honestly, it would probably been a much better administration.
Called the peace pipe.
But seriously, the fact that we never knew that when everyone was sort of like picking apart Trump's like, look, they always lie about the president's health. They always say he's healthier than he is.
I think Jake Tapper, there was like something happened. Jake Tapper called him out and got ridiculed for it. Mm-hmm. Like years ago, he said, I smelled smoke on Obama, and then they all made fun of him. I think it was Tapper. And now he's like,
I do recall this, yes.
Yeah.
But it's like that's what they're going to do again. They're going to totally, because it's fine.
A tan suit?
Oh, that was the only scandal.
That was the right, wasn't it? That was criticizing him.
So the tan suit thing is a total fake news fiction. It's like a handful of people made fun of the tan suit.
Yep.
And then everybody has now put like the tan suit was this huge scandal on the right. And it's like it was literally a handful of people making jokes.
I remember, interestingly, we have Luke Rudkowski is hanging out. He was at, I think it was like it was a debate or something, a DNC convention. And he asked a couple Democrats about the extrajudicial assassination by Barack Obama of a 16-year-old American citizen whose name was Abdul Rahman AlAwlaki. And it was, I can't remember the guy's name, Charlie Gibbs, was that his name? He said, well, he should have had a better father. So the questions that arose from seriously.
That is a hot take.
Yeah.
16-year-old American from Denver, Colorado, lived in San Diego, was visiting his grandparents in Yemen. Barack Obama ordered a drone strike in Yemen. We're not at war with Yemen. Blowing up a civilian restaurant. We don't target civilians. Killing a 16-year-old American citizen. What the?
Don't target kids.
And his
Talk about
dad
scandals.
was somebody that Obama wanted dead, right?
Yeah, he was suspected of being like a high profile like jihadist.
So the theory is they killed the guy's son?
Well, the anti-war activists think that Barack Obama was basically telling the world, if you F with us, I will kill your kids. And he's willing to blow up civilians to do it.
It's so funny how, though, the media complex pretended that Trump's approach to foreign policy was going to be something that dragged him down, that was this negative around him with the American people, when it is so much more historically in sync with what Americans tend to want, which is they are not peaceniks. Okay, they go through periods of, after heavy wars, of being, sort of looking like peaceniks, but in reality they tend to be, as Walter Russell Mead has written, consistently Jacksonian, which is that if you leave us alone and you don't screw with us, then we don't want to go over there and screw
Right.
with you and have it come back and have it be complicated and that kind of thing. We just want you to leave us alone. But if you screw with us, we're going to come over and we're just going to
And we're armed.
beat the crap out of you for
And then some.
and more. And that's what they like. But then they don't like to stay around and exist in these nation building ways.
Right.
And in fact, George W. Bush made that same argument when he was running for president in 2000. He said, we don't want to be in the nation building business anymore. That type of thing. Wow, exactly. That's how it worked out for him. Go back. You can go back and find that clip. Well, but I think that's another indication where that is the undercurrent, because it's actually pretty consistent with, frankly, a lot of people who come from military families want. It's the fact that they don't want their kid to be sent over to some small war. They understand the purpose of defending America. They're patriots. They want the country to be defended. They don't want to, get rid of the military or shut that all down. At the same time, they don't want to hear about their kid dying in Africa, as we saw, a little more than a year ago, and have senators come on the camera and say, I didn't even know that we were in this part of Africa.
Wow.
And that's what happened. And it's like, that should disgust us. We should never have a situation where that happens.
This is the first time I've heard of that.
We had a lefty on the show, and he was like 26. We were talking about Joe Biden's, as vice president in these scandals, and he was like, I think I was 15 or 16 when that happened. And
So
I'm like, a lot of these
totally. And I'm experiencing this now because I am an old man at 38, and I have employees now who were 2 years old when 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
3 years old, and they don't even. When one of my colleagues makes a reference to Team America World Police and they have no idea what he's talking about, which is really depressing. It's like, what is this puppet sex movie that you're talking about? Anyway.
Get familiar.
The only way I would sleep with you is if you promised me you would never die. I will never die. The thing that is amazing about it is you start to see how, and I didn't listen to people who were older than me and who told me this, our politics repeats so much.
Yeah.
It has this rhyming quality to it where we come back to these same points with new figures and new elements, but they also repeat in these fascinating ways. And, oftentimes I think you end up having these controversial in the time figures who in retrospect prove to be viewed as incredibly effective or having done amazing things. Reagan was one of these figures. Clinton became one of these figures. I think in retrospect, people look back and they're like, wow, that Bill Clinton, he was, very centrist and sort of did these culturally slightly conservative things and, had these attitudes in different directions. At the time, he was the most controversial person we'd ever seen in the presidency. And Republicans hated him and loathed him and investigated the crap out of him and impeached him. And I think in retrospect, we'll come to look back on Trump as being a similar figure in a lot of respects, he governed closer to the center than people actually
many people are saying, how many months or years until Ellen is, sharing candy with Trump at a baseball game or something.
Soon, but I think it'll be Biden first.
Well, look, George W. Bush in that famous,
Yes.
bit with sharing the candy with
Who
Michelle
will it
Obama
be?
or whatever.
Who will it be? Because it won't be somebody who's conservative like Vince Vaughn. It'll be someone who's a little bit more. Who will it be?
It's
Maybe an
crazy
athlete?
to me that if you look
Yeah.
at the things George W. Bush did and Dick Cheney compared to what Trump did, it's just like night and day. And here they are. There was a poll that came out that said Democrats view George W. Bush more favorably than Trump, and I'm like, y'all have lost it.
Oh my gosh!
But this is
They
why.
just don't
but
know.
listen, no. This is why I brought up the dude.
Educated on it.
Yes, but when you have people who are, you got 20-year-olds who voted, 20-year-olds who are activists online right now, marching down the street,
Right, they
waving
were
banners.
6 when we got into Iraq.
Yeah, and they were
Or young,
10.
5
In,
or
they were
whatever.
they were
Younger than that.
what 8 years old during the economic crisis. They were 10 years old in 2010. They were 11 during Occupy Wall Street. So while we're on Occupy Wall Street, and you've got the left rising up, complaining about Obama. And both Democrats and Republicans. And we got all of these years. Look, the emergence of Black Lives Matter and all this stuff happened under Obama. The National Guard being deployed, all of it's under Obama. We had these riots. We had, Libya, Syria, all of these conflicts. You have stories about drone strikes. They called him Obama, like bombing people. They called him the deporter in chief. Here we are. We get Trump. Not good in the first few years in foreign policy, improving very much so in the last 2 years. Firing Bolton, especially, I bring it up all the time. It was a great move. Shouldn't have hired him in the first place.
Yep.
And then I'm talking to these people who are now in their 20s, and they're like, I was 10 when all that was happening. And I'm like, so you come into my house. We've been fighting this fight against these insane people. You know, Hillary Clinton was told a no-fly zone over Syria would mean World War III, war with Russia. And she was like, basically, so what?
So you know what you just touched on there is one of the great ironies of Trump's presidency, which is that to the degree that it was a failure, it is because he failed to do the very thing he was most famous for before coming into the presidency, which is fire people.
Oh,
Yes.
If he had fired
Seriously?
James Comey on day one,
oh yeah.
you don't have all of that. I don't
He
think
trusted.
you know,
he trusted too many people.
If you fire or never hire Bolton, you don't have that period. If you fire Anthony Fauci, the minute that he comes out and says we shouldn't reopen schools, despite the rest of the first world reopening schools, there's a lot of different things that could have gone right here if Trump had been quicker to fire people as opposed to
if he had and if he had actually been almost if it was even one degree towards more authoritarian as much as they claim him to be.
But and in addition, it's the funny thing is that's the actual. I would argue the same thing of George W. Bush. You know, Michael Brown and Katrina. You know, heck of a job, Brownie. He should have fired him almost immediately as it became clear that he was not cut out to run FEMA in this situation. You know, he declined firing Rumsfeld, you know, when Rumsfeld was willing to go. Like, there's a number of instances where he kind of stuck with people out of personal loyalty, and it ended up backfiring. I just think that it's one of those situations where things rhyme and people end up getting caught.
Cowardice. Bush was a coward. He had Cheney run the military. Trump's a coward. He wants people to like him, so he won't make hard decisions.
I wouldn't necessarily say cowardice. It's more we forget sometimes that politicians are human. And I think that one of the things that animates them so much, it's similar to actors. No offense to Mr. Page, is that they have this deep hole in their heart that needs to be filled with something, whether that's adulation or praise or affirmation. I mean, there's a reason that so many great politicians have parents who are drunks.
That describes Donald Trump.
And
he
really
puts
does.
his name in giant gold letters on tops of buildings all over the world.
Yeah.
The joke is that he was neglected. I mean, the left argues he was literally abused or neglected by
he
his
was
father.
letting Bolton run the show until he saw that people hated him on Twitter, and he's like, "Bad, gotta get rid of him so people like me."
So
the American Conservative wrote, "Fire Bolton, hire Tulsi," and I was clapping. I'm like, yes, like she absolutely get rid of this guy.
But I think that this is a situation where, once again, we now have a political situation that is dominated by the olds, by the people who have nothing in common with all the people who you were just talking about.
Yep.
We had 3 presidents from the same birth year, 1946. Right. Okay, it had George W. Bush, it had Bill Clinton, and it had Donald Trump. Wow. They were all born within 7 months of each other. And if you think about it, they're all kind of the different aspects of boomerism.
Yeah.
Like Clinton, the kind of, hippie higher ed, draft dodger, George W., kind of the miscreant, like the guy who kind of had a rough time, but then kind of made good.
Frat boy.
And then Trump is kind of the rat pack, holdover, over the top Vegas,
Where are the young people in this,
Well, we just went older.
Biden?
We just went to our first silent generation era. We went older than the baby boom.
He snapped his foot playing with his dog.
Seriously.
This is the
No.
official
Listen,
story.
I'm gonna say it again. Joe Biden is the worst thing to happen to this country. Listen, there's a lot of. I'm sure Joe's fine in a lot of ways. He's bad in a lot of ways. But for what this country is going through right now, the worst possible thing that could happen is Joe Biden. You know why?
Because he's frail.
Every Republican hates him, or for the most part doesn't like him, and half the Democrats don't like him. He only got elected, arguably from the right. They'll say because of fraud, but in the surface level approach, people voted against Trump.
Yes.
Against Trump, meaning at a time when we are more polarized than ever and we need strong leadership to unite us, what we get is nothing. We have no president.
People
we have no
hate
leader.
voted, dude.
I really say this with hope that it is not true. But the worst president in American history, from my perspective, is James Buchanan. And obviously, he led to civil war.
It was a long time ago.
Can you explain why?
James Buchanan was a feckless and corrupt sort of old, guy who really was completely unprepared for the kind of strife that was coming into the country. Ultimately, he was obviously followed by Abraham Lincoln, and we immediately went into civil war because of it. Now, I'm not predicting that, and I want to make clear that I'm not predicting that. But it has a similar flavor to it of someone who is just elected in for a lot of reasons that don't have to do with him, and then shows himself to be very ill-suited for the historic moment that he inhabits. And I really worry that that's what we're facing right now.
Maybe Donald Trump convinces, look, Pennsylvania says they're not going to come into session. They say we need 5 days for a joint resolution. Maybe Trump gets a lightning strike 3 times.
No.
Georgia,
maybe,
Wisconsin, and Arizona. But
It's
guess
too
what?
late.
You know what's really interesting?
No one's that lucky in a casino.
Not when,
But hey. I look, I've been saying it since the 7th. Like, I think it's astronomically likely it's going to be. I shouldn't say it that way. The odds extremely in Joe Biden's favor to the point where it's like 99.99%. But the reason I reserved that little bit, actually early on I said it was probably like 97 because Trump still had these lawsuits and he still had the states weren't certified. Now we're at a point where it's like winning the lottery 3 times in a row for Trump to pull it off.
It's never gonna.
But
I
I'm
mean,
not. But
I
I
can't
wouldn't
say never. But
I wouldn't say never. I wouldn't say never because listen. We had these hearings, okay, and people are freaked out. It doesn't mean it's likely at all. It just means the door. Here's the way I put it. There's a track that Trump is on. At the end of that
There's
track,
a gleam, men. There's a gleam.
Yes, there's a train track. Trump's train is on it, and it is headed towards a door that means re-election. But in between are loop-de-loops, jumps, boulders, trees falling over, and it's like, I don't see it making there. Maybe. Extremely unlikely.
Have you looked back at the election of 1876?
Yes. That was when they appointed a council to determine the president.
It was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. But it also puts in perspective how, like, I know 1876 seems like a long time ago, but that just shows like our American bias.
Almost 150 years.
You know, like there are people who are walking around who's like that was their grandpa who was around, you know, during
like
that.
30 presidents ago or something.
Well, I was listening to the radio once, and it was a beer commercial. It was an import, and they were like, our beer is protected by the fine beer law of 1217, and I was like, wow, like the United States doesn't go back that far, you know.
Yeah,
we are so incredibly young as a nation.
Dude, I was just thinking, in order for us to have a normal conversation and just talk about this stuff, we have to have our own social network. It has to be a mesh network, so we don't have an ISP. We have to be off the banking system and have crypto only because the banks can all shut us down. We have to have our own electricity on site and our own water supply on site, because the government can shut off our water and electricity
but
just
listen,
to have a normal conversation publicly.
But listen, if you actually, these people, the Green New Deal types and the leftists, everything you described should be exactly what they're striving for. Get people off the grid so that they're self-sustainable. Get people. Why do we have lawns? Just grass, and then we mow the grass and we throw it in the compost.
We got to grow our own food.
Yeah, why don't we grow potatoes? What if you turn your front lawn into a potato field? And you have food.
You don't have to grow
I don't know how to
your own
grow
food
potatoes,
because you can go buy stuff with crypto. But if you can't turn your crypto into cash, fiat, because you don't have a bank, because
I wonder.
the Stripe or the Swift payment system has cut you out, has banned your person.
Right. And if we all became more self-sufficient, that would have less of an impact on us. If we could grow our own food, if we had our own energy in our homes,
just so you can talk without being censored.
But do you think though that the lockdowns and everything have improved the possibility of that? Or
no,
it
it decreased.
Yes.
It's now you got people saying, government, why won't you give me free food?
Exactly.
It's like, I got a garden in my backyard. Look, I moved out to the middle of nowhere because I don't want to be forced to live under their boot. Mm-hmm. When they start locking you down, telling you can and can't go to the store, you can't go out at night, you eventually run out of the limited food you have living in the city. And then you're just sitting there saying, please, government, can I now eat?
Okay, can I speak to that? So I was born in Mississippi, grew up a little bit in South Carolina, and then we moved to rural Virginia, which is actually about, an area where before the big tech boom, before all of these companies moved in, it was all rural farmland and farmland that was starting to be chopped up into suburbs, but still homes that had tons of land and the like. And living in that area, you were surrounded by 2 types of people. A very rural area. Basically, it was people who their families had lived there for ages. They were used to being incredibly self-sufficient. When winter came, if they were up, sort of in the Blue Ridge, they could, live up there and be fine for ages. And then you had these people who were moving there, often from California and the like, to staff these jobs at, then it was AOL and MCI WorldCom and places like that were the first ones coming in. And the differences between the kids could not have been greater. in terms of expectations about life and what was self-sufficiency and things like that, and seeing the early stages of like helicopter parenting as a trend at the same time that there were families where it was like, oh yeah, the little kid, they'll just go off and they'll take care of themselves and then they'll come back. Total divide. And I feel like as a country, we're seeing that helicopter approach just completely take over. And the worry that I've had, and I've said this since this whole thing began, I had a conversation with a friend of mine who does a great podcast called The Fifth Column. And we were going back and forth, and he said, I'm worried that we're going to see revolution. We're going to see people with guns in the streets, and that they're going to be fighting and killing politicians and things and the like. And I said, my worry is they're just going to go along with all this because the American people are too docile now. They don't have that self-sufficiency gene anymore. It's been smothered. And I just think that everything that's happened since is vindicated.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. We do the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. So come back to check us out when we go live. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification bell, and we are also available on all podcast platforms for free if you want to listen to us there. Thanks for hanging out, and we will see you all next time.